My name is Adeline Moussion Esteve. I'm a postdoctoral researcher on the Recovery Histories project. I'm leading on the ethnographic strand with Baltic Core, and I'm also the liaison with the lived experience advisory group. So prior to coming to Recovery Histories, I was involved with the SHAME project, Sexual Harms and Medical Encounters. I did my PhD in anthropology with this group, and I researched gender-based violence. So my PhD thesis was about women's experiences of gender-based violence in France. I met them in a trauma-informed social medical organization for women victims of violence in a low-income area near Paris. And what I did was I immersed myself in the organization for a year. I observed consultations with patients, and I closely followed 7 women in and out the organization. And what I explored was how they talked about their experiences and the harms of the violence that they've lived. And the question was around the absence of uses of trauma in their discourses, because I met them in an organization that taught them how to use trauma to recast their present difficulties. And actually with me, they did not use trauma. So what I did was explore the other registers that they used to describe their experiences. And in terms of findings, what I documented in the thesis was that when we talk about gender-based violence, we often hear about, brain processes, neurohormonal processes, but actually what these women talked about were social impediments, structural impediments, institutional difficulties in their lives, and they talked less about processes happening in their brain or in their bodies, but more in their everyday lives as mothers, as citizens, as patients, as individuals in a society. So that's the main finding, that there are mediations to the experience of violence that are not just located in the brain and in the body. My research interests are around gender-based violence, sexual violence, critical trauma studies, and critical approaches to medical and psychological knowledge and interventions, as well as feminist ethnography. I think what I find most challenging about researching sexual violence is, I think, the state of the world generally and the state of academia at the moment. I think it also has to do with how researchers' emotions are often treated as secondary to the research processes. And so that leaves us to try to find solutions to our difficulties on our own. So I've published 2 peer-reviewed papers at the moment, one on fear, and I try to contrast the discourses that we hear about when we understand fear through trauma as a case of terror that produces often fight or flight reflexes onto individuals. And what I found by working with mothers living in domestic violence is that actually fear is also an occasion to learn and acquire knowledge on which they can then make plans. What I also found was that making plans was not necessarily making plans to leave one's abusive partner, because actually both living and staying in abusive relationship were conducive to fear. So that paper tried to challenge the neurological definitions and framings of fear in domestic violence. And the other paper I've published is around mothering, and how in France domestic violence is framed around 2 risks: femicide and health issues, life expectancy issues. And actually when you work with women who are living through domestic violence, are also parenting their children, the body of the mother is what you notice, and not the body of the victim at risk of death or health issues.